Perils in Paradise has been out for a couple weeks now, the meta has settled a little bit, and you're probably wondering what's worth crafting. So today, I'll be taking a look at all the legendary cards in Perils in Paradise and letting you know which ones are worth crafting and which ones are worth passing. To start things off, we have the tourist cards, which I am going to lump together because unfortunately you do need to craft them in order to interact with the main set mechanic. And some of these are better than others. You know, some of these are very good cards in their own right, others are very bad cards, but you need to run them regardless if you want to interact with the tourist mechanic. So if the class interests you and the tourist side interests you, I say just go for it. But I did want to highlight a couple that are especially worth it or especially not worth it. For example, both Mista Vista and Ham the Hungry are very much worth it. Both Druid and Warriors tourist cards really complement the class and they will be played until they rotate. So if you play Druid or Warrior, 100% go ahead and craft their tourist cards. And on the flip side, Ranger Gilly and Rayla Sand Sculptor, I would say avoid if possible. Both of those aren't really utilizing their tourist cards and they're kind of just bad cards in their own right. But as I mentioned, if you are a die-hard hunter or mage player and you really want to interact with that mechanic, go ahead and craft them because unfortunately you have to. In terms of the tourist mechanic itself, I really do like it. I like having more options. I like dual class cards. The only downside is, as I mentioned, this is essentially just more dual class cards with a 1600 dust tag added onto it. But in the end, I feel like most people are going to want most of these, or at the very least for the classes they frequent. And starting off with the regular legendaries, we go into Death Knight, which has Eliza Goreblade as a 4-mana 4/3 legendary minion with 1 blood, 1 frost rune, and it has Death Rattle. For the rest of the game, your minions have +1 attack. And this card is absolutely a craft. This card is seeing play in Rainbow Death Knight. I think it's a very strong effect that'll make its way into other Death Knight decks if they ever exist. I could talk about this forever, but if things keep going the way they're going, Rainbow Death Knight might be the main deck that'll be played for the foreseeable future. But regardless, if that's the case, Eliza will still be played. It's a very strong card. And I've also seen some wild Warlock decks creeping up that utilize combos to repeat this effect, so that's there if that's something that interests you. But overall, if you like Death Knight, especially Rainbow Death Knight, go ahead. This is an easy safe craft. Next up, we have Demon Hunter with Patches the Pilot. It is a 1-mana 1/1 with Battlecry. Shuffle 6 parachutes into your deck that summon a 1/1 pirate with charge when drawn. And this card's an absolute craft. You know, it is played a ton in both standard and wild. It is a core card in any kind of pirate deck you're going to play, so it very much lives up to the Patches name in that regard as well. So if you want to play pirates with Demon Hunter or Shaman in standard or wild, go ahead and craft this card. You won't be disappointed. Next up, we have Druid with Cruise Captain Laura. It is a 7-mana 4/5 with Battlecry, summon 2 random locations, and this card is absolutely terrible. Do not craft it. I feel sorry for you if you open this card. For Hunter, we have Sasquawk. It is a 7-mana 4/5 with Battlecry. Repeat each card you played last turn. And this card's interesting because it's not being played in Hunter, but it is being played in multiple priest decks. So if you're a Hunter player and this card interests you, I say avoid it. If you are a priest player and this card looks interesting, go ahead and craft it. It is a pretty strong card and very, very good in priest. For Mage, we have King Tide. It is a 4-mana 4/4 with Battlecry. Both players' spells cost 5 until the end of your next turn. And this one pains me to say because I do think this is a really cool and interesting card, but I think this one is a pass. And that's mainly due to the fact that Mage is in a pretty bad spot right now. You know, they do have Elemental Mage right now, which is doing pretty well, but that deck doesn't run this card, and outside of that, Mage is really struggling, and there's just not really an incentive to run this card as good as it may be. So who knows, maybe after rotation or some more expansions, this card will see play because I think it is a good card, but it's just not worth crafting at this time. For Paladin, we have Sanc'Azel as a 5-mana 3/8 with Rush. After this attacks, turn into location. The location it turns into then gives a minion Rush and whatever Sanc'Azel's attack is, and then it turns back into a minion, can attack again, and when it turns back into a location, it's then closed for that turn. So this card's very similar and comparable to Remornia from Warrior. It's essentially attacking, giving something else a buff and rush, and then attacking again. And this card has started making its way into hand buff Paladin, and as a result, I think it's worth crafting. I think this is just a strong, generic Paladin card that I can see fitting into various decks over the next couple years. For Priest now, we have Narain Soothfancy. It is a 4-mana 4/4 Battlecry. Get 2 fortunes that are copies of the top card of your deck. And how this works is you get 2 cards in your hand that are perpetually the top card of your deck. So if you do draw a card during your turn, they will then instantly switch to whatever the current top card is. And this one's kind of similar to King Tide in that I think it's a very cool and fun card, but it's just not a very good card, and I would say it's not worth crafting. But, you know, it is seeing some play in some slower Highlander Priest decks, so if you really like, you know, like a Control Priest or a Highlander Priest and you have some extra dust, go ahead and craft it. But I would say 99% of the time, other than that, I would say it's worth avoiding. Next up for Rogue, we have Treasure Hunter Eudora. It is a 6 mana 4/5 with Battlecry. Go on a side quest to discover amazing loot. Play 3 cards from other classes to complete it. And once you complete this side quest, the reward is discovering 2 different Kazakusan treasures, which is obviously a very, very strong effect. Most of those cards are very, very good. But this card, not so much. This card is a pass, unfortunately. It is a very, very cool and fun effect, but it's just too slow. You know, this is one of the prime candidates I'm hoping gets a buff. I could very much see this card being at 5 mana and still being fine. So fingers crossed that they buff this card and maybe it'll see some play, but as it stands now, it very much avoid it. For Shaman, we have Carress Cabaret Star. It is a 5 mana 5/5 that says, while in your hand, play 2 different spell schools to transform. So how this works is each different spell school will add a different effect to Carress. So the first spell school you play will add the 1 effect, and then once you play a second spell school, the card will transform and have the 2 effects from the 2 you played. So this is a very versatile card, right? You can kind of tailor it to whatever the situation is. You know, you can turn it into some healing or some removal or some draw. So it's very cool in that regard, but the downside is it's just not consistent. And unfortunately, this card is a pass, mainly due to the fact that while it is very versatile, it is not very consistent. You know, the best way to put it would be it is a jack of all trades at master of none. So I had high hopes for this card. I think it is cool, but unfortunately, I would avoid it. Next up for Warlock, we have Party Planner Vona. It is a 6 mana 4/4 with Battlecry. If you've taken 8 damage on your turn, summon Ouroboros. And then Ouroboros is an 8/8 taunt that has Death Rattle. Give a minion in your hand Death Rattle, summon Ouroboros. So essentially how this works is if you've taken the damage requirement, it is a 6 mana 12/12 that as long as you have minions in your hand to get the Death Rattle, you'll keep summoning the 8/8 taunt for free. And going into this expansion, I really had high hopes for this card. I think it's a really cool effect. And good news is it's worth crafting. This card has recently started making its way into Painlock. And I think this is a card kind of similar to Sanc'Azel in that it's just a generically good Warlock card that I can see this going into a lot of different Warlock decks over the next couple years. So if you like Warlock and I think this is a cool effect, go ahead and craft it. Next up, we have Warrior with the Ryecleaver. It is a 7 mana 4/2 weapon with Battlecry and Death Rattle. Get a slice of bread, and then get 2 to sandwich any minions in between. So how it works is you play the weapon, you get the bread in your hand, and then once you break the weapon, you'll get the second slice of bread, and then all the minions in between get smushed into the sandwich that you can then play to summon them all. So it's essentially a very slow and clunky way to cheat out some minions, and it is very much not worth crafting. You know, during the theory crafting streams, there was a little bit of hype for this card. You know, some streamers were able to make it work and, you know, kind of made some fun decks. But once it got released to the wild, people really realized that this card is not good. And this is another example of, to me, a prime candidate for buffs. I could see this card being buffed in some way, most likely a mana reduction. I think even at 6 mana or something, it would not be overpowered by any means. So hopefully we'll see some buffs and maybe this card will be played one day, but for now, it's just bad. We have Griftah, Trusted Vendor. It's a 4 mana 4/5 with Battlecry. Discover an amazing amulet to give to both players, but the enemies is a phony version. The amulets vary in power a bit. You know, they range from drawing cards, dealing damage, healing damage, stealing minions. There's a lot of different effects, but I think it's a very versatile card, and most of the time, the one you're giving to your opponent isn't that great. Some of them, again, are better or worse than others, and it's just a fun, versatile card. I would say it's very much worth crafting. It's being played in a lot of different decks, and to me, this is like the perfect, like, 30th card in a deck. You know, if you ever get your deck to like 28, 29 cards, and you're kind of struggling to figure out what to add at the end, I think this is a perfect card to add in to top off the deck. But overall, this is just a fun card, and like I said, if it interests you, go ahead and craft it. I think it's a safe craft that I'll see play for a long time. And then on the flip side, we have AFK. It is a 5 mana 0/5 that has, at the end of your turn, give all friendly minions that didn't attack +2/+2. And this card is 100% do not craft. I am so sorry for you if you open this in your packs. This is the least played legendary in this expansion, and it is so bad. So do not ever think about crafting this card. It is terrible. And then last but not least, we have Incindius. It is a 6 mana 2/10 with, at the start of your turn, upgrade your eruptions, and Battlecry is to shuffle 5 eruptions into your deck. And the eruptions are cast when drawn spells that deal 1 damage to all enemies. So how it works, if you play Incindius, shuffles the 5 eruptions in your deck. If it's alive at the end of your turn still, it'll then upgrade them to 2 damage. So whenever you draw the eruption, it'll deal 2 damage to all enemies, including the enemy's face. And then obviously if Incindius stays on the board multiple turns, they will keep upgrading 3 damage, 4 damage, etc. And I would say this card's a craft. I think this card slots into a lot of fun different decks. It's kind of similar to Griftah in that it can just be added to a variety of decks as like the 29th or 30th card, or you can just add it as incidental damage as well. You know, it's essentially 6 mana for a 2/10 body that'll deal 10 damage to the opponent and their minions over the course of the game. So say you're playing a Reno deck and you're struggling a bit to get up to 30 cards. I think depending on your class, this is a very easy inclusion. That'll be all the cards for this expansion so far. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like and leave a comment. Let me know, what was your favorite card in this expansion? What legendaries did you open? Also, what do you think about the set so far and the tourist mechanic? But other than that, thanks for watching and I'll see you when the mini set comes out.